So let's talk about revising your 5 paragraph essay because basically your essay and your writing is never as good as it can be on that very first draft. So what can we do to make that piece better? First of all, let's talk about the difference between revising and editing because these are two very different things. Editing, which we will not be talking about today, means to correct spelling. It means to correct punctuation, capitalization. It is when you fix the things that are wrong with your paper on a cosmetic level. Revising is changing and adding meaning to your paper. It's elaborating. It's doing all those things to enhance what it is you are trying to argue or the story you are trying to tell. Which brings us to the question, why revise at all? Well, there are many things we can revise for. We can revise to make our thoughts more clear. We can revise for clarity. We can revise to make sure that our thoughts flow from one to the other very easily so that the reader understands what it is that we're trying to argue. We can revise for development, just in case we've got a really thin argument or a really thin story. If we add details and elaborate, we can make that story more elaborate. And also for style. Sometimes when we write our first draft, we don't necessarily put all the thought that we can into sentences or imagery or things like that. Word choice and revision gives us a chance to go back and to enhance our paper from a stylistic standpoint. When I think of revision, I like to think about this acronym RADS, which is very simple. There are certain things you can do which count as revision, and they're simply to reorder sentences, reorder paragraphs, add, add details, add a paragraph, add a quote, add some piece of information that will help your paper. You can delete. Let's say you've got things that aren't necessary, irrelevant comments, things like that. Or you can substitute. You can take out one sentence and put another in its place in order to make sure that you are meaning exactly what it is you are trying to say. All right, so the first technique is to go ahead and look at the paper in its entirety. Look at the whole paper. For the 5 paragraph essay, do you do what's required of you? Do you have 5 paragraphs? Is there an introduction? Are there 3 body paragraphs? And is there a conclusion? It's very simple to take a look at your paper and kind of figure that out. Do the body paragraphs look meaty? Is there enough of them? So can you go down and say, okay, I've got 1 body paragraph, 2 body paragraphs, 3 body paragraphs, 4 body paragraphs, and 5 body paragraphs. Are my paragraphs nice and thick? Does it look like they are comprised of several sentences? Am I developing my thoughts? Is a question you should be asking yourself. So why don't you pause this video, take a quick look at your essay, make sure it's meaty enough, make sure that all the parts are there. The next thing we're talking about is revising your introduction. Remember, the introduction is that very first paragraph in your essay. When revising the intro, you should think about a couple of things. First of all, you should remember the purpose. The purpose is to let us know what you're talking about. Introduce that topic, introduce that argument, and also to make me care. Because if you don't make me care right from the get-go, most likely I'm going to check out of that essay. I might not even read it if I'm a reader on the street or somebody opening up the newspaper. Every introduction starts with a grabber. The grabber is that sentence that is the first sentence of your introduction. It's meant to grab the reader's attention, to lead them in, to make them care about what you're saying. So there are many different ways you can do this. We went over this already. You can just pluck out a relevant quote from someone famous. Maybe John F. Kennedy has something to say about your topic. Maybe Gandhi did. Who knew? Who knows? Maybe Marilyn Monroe. Maybe somebody not quite so famous, but who still might have some insight into the situation and be an authority. Maybe it's a startling fact about your topic, some piece of factual information that would make your reader say, ooh, wow, I better read this. Or maybe it's that vivid description technique where you use imagery and you put the reader in a scenario which makes him or her be able to understand what somebody's going through in relation to the topic you're writing about. Why don't you go take a look at your introduction? Make sure you have a grabber. Make sure it's a good grabber. Make sure that if you were reading that essay, you would read on. Make sure you've got a focus statement. Focus statements are very, very, very simple, and their purpose is to simply define the topic. This should be the simplest sentence in the world. If you're writing about global warming, you could say something like, global warming is a huge problem in our world today. If you're writing about passing in the hallways, you could say, many American teenagers pass through hallways every day. Just simply, what is the topic of that essay? There is no argument in the focus statement. It's simply a factual statement about the topic. So why don't you go take a look at your introduction, make sure you've got a focus statement. Pause the video. All right, here we are. The last part of the introduction, you know, is what's called the thesis. And the thesis makes your argument and briefly supports that argument. So you should, in a perfect thesis, a restricted thesis, you should have the argument and then briefly 3 reasons why that argument is true. So something like, you know, my parents should allow me to get a driver's license so that I can learn responsibility, provide safe transportation for my peers, and be able to get to and from work and alleviate some of the hassle my parents have to go through for driving me places. Why don't you go pause the video, make sure you've got a thesis in your introduction, make sure it makes an argument, and make sure you are laying out the organization in your essay by putting your supporting points in there too. You need to do is go ahead and revise those body paragraphs. Now, take a look at each one. Remember, the body paragraph, the job is to develop the argument in your thesis. That's what the body paragraphs are for. Kind of develops point by point what it is you're trying to argue. Make sure that each of your body paragraphs has a topic sentence. The topic sentence is the first sentence of each body paragraph, and it needs to define what's in that paragraph. Everything that follows in that paragraph should directly support that topic sentence, which should in turn directly support the thesis. So it's very important. Every body paragraph, let your reader know what that paragraph's about. Give me a topic sentence. Also in that body paragraph are details and commentary. You know that if you have a topic sentence, most likely you're going to have to support that topic sentence and develop that argument by bringing in details, stats, quotes, and your thoughts on these details, stats, and quotes in order to help prove your point, support that topic sentence, and help you develop that argument. Obviously, any detail that is in a body paragraph must be directly relevant to that topic sentence. Otherwise, it probably doesn't belong there. So why don't you go back and take a look at each of your body paragraphs. Make sure that each one has a topic sentence. Make sure that each one has details, and all those details are relevant. All right, the last thing you're going to have to do is go ahead and revise that conclusion. Remember, the purpose of the conclusion is simply to summarize your argument. Your reader has just been trailed through the different points you're trying to make. At the end, you've got to kind of solidify your argument, and you do so by reminding them of a couple of different things that are already in your essay. And it's also to inspire your reader to act. In a persuasive essay, you want your reader to think about something, to do something, to speak up against something, to adopt something. This is what you're trying to get them to do. So the best way to think about a conclusion is just simply a backwards introduction. Remember, you start off with just a modified focus statement. Basically, what was that essay about? What is the general topic of that essay? So ask yourself, do I restate the topic of the essay in my conclusion? Then you will have a modified thesis statement. In a modified thesis statement, you just restate the argument, that thesis, but in slightly different words, because you don't want to be repetitive and put it exactly like you had it in the introduction. So just kind of be like, okay, how can I say this but a little bit differently? That's the modified thesis statement. And then finally, some sort of clincher, some sort of strong ending, maybe a call to action. What should my reader do? Do you want that reader to, buy you a car and put you on the path of freedom? Or do you want that reader to, go out and act about global warming? What is your recommendation? How are you going to end strongly? That's the last part of that introduction. Hammer that puppy home by ending strongly and leaving a great taste in that reader's mouth. Make that reader want to be desperate to act on your recommendation. All right, so now you are done revising. After you've taken those steps and you've taken a look at that conclusion and the rest of your essay, and you've made it as meaningful as possible by rereading it and adding and reordering and deleting, etc., now it's time to go edit. So continue on to that next video.